Yay! So we should be live. I'll give everyone a minute to catch up. I'm going to see if I can see the chat because this always confuses me. If someone wants to link me the chat at Facebook, that would be hugely helpful. We'll find out. I can't see it yet. But welcome to Views with Verse, where we interview and talk about deity. And this week we have the amazing Miss Owlvine Green to talk all about the Morrigan. Mercury retrograde permitting, because we've already had problems. Okay, so that should be the chat.
So hopefully that works.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, I can see it. Is anybody in the chat?
Let me say hi. Hi.
Okay, good. So hopefully give it a couple of minutes. I know Paul wanted this, so let's see if I can find Paul and share that. A little bit of technical difficulties as always with my Views with Verse. I apologize. But hopefully...
honestly, it's Google. It's Google. Like every time I'm starting like an anti, like a hate Google club or something. I don't know. I swear.
Okay, we might be a bit quiet today anyway because we are right in the middle of the night for the US, as I think.
Yeah.
Can anyone else see the live chat? I just want one person to say we could see it, it's working, and then I can.
Yeah, it's funny being on this time, isn't it? Because like most of my viewership is American, like massive, predominantly. So they're all in bed.
They'll all have to catch up. It'll be worth it, I swear. Nobody's got the chat, nobody at all. I'll ask on Facebook once before we get this started. I will ask on Facebook. Da 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 da. Just keep yourselves amused for 1 minute. We'll just do some hand movements.
Make a tea.
Yeah. Throw the cat out, you know, whatever. Like.
Oh, it's Eris. Hi, Eris. She's here.
Oh, good. Okay, there we go. People can see the live chat. Good. We shall start Views with Verse properly within probably the first 5-minute mark. Ignore all of that. Come right here. Welcome to Views with Verse. We are here with the amazing Miss Owlvine Green to talk about the Goddess Morrigan and all things deity. So we normally start this off with asking the nice, simple, easy question on how you see deity and what deity means to you.
Very simple. It's one that should be answered in about 30 seconds.
3-word answer. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, how do I see deity and what does deity mean to me? I have quite a pantheistic view of everything. You know, I feel like we are all a part of something, you know, a part of a whole, a part of the all. And I feel like deity, you know, I suppose fits within that too, that kind of spiritual realm. I think that deities are a part of like one something, but also our energies broken up into their own kind of flavor as well, and have, yeah, you know, and we each connect with them differently through different stages of our life, or because of our particular life story. You know, there may be one, there may be many through a lifetime. I think that I really truly feel that ultimately we are using different names for the same thing. You know, so I always get a little bit confused, for example, when people argue about what God's name is, right? Like, oh, this is my God and my God's right. No, this is my God and my God's right. Like, I think that whatever it is that we're feeling, like it's the same thing. It's madness to me that we argue over this kind of thing when it's all faith-based. You know, it's about personal experience and personal feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we interpret it in different ways, and then call it different names and have different set experiences with that energy too, or a facet of that energy, if that answers the question.
So I've already kind of mentioned that Owlvine works with the Goddess Morrigan right now, and so do I. But I am going to mention, if anyone didn't know, I imagine everybody will know, and I imagine it's just us for this hangout because of the weird time of night it is for the Americans, but that you work with Baba Yaga.
Mm-hmm.
And then have you kind of transitioned over to the Morrigan, or is it they're still both very present in your life? So is it kind of like a multiple deity worship in your household, or has it become very much just working with the Morrigan?
Well, I began with Baba Yaga in terms of in terms of her feminine energy. Actually, it was more of like a Gaian energy. I mean, that's what I was calling it, but it was like sort of like the earth. And then it was Baba Yaga because I really felt this strong like crone energy around me, and I have Slavic roots, and so she's always sort of really interested me. So I was working with her. She's still around, but I haven't worked with her since the Morrigan kind of became present. I still think she's sort of there, but you know, my needs in terms of goddess are well and truly met currently. I do work as well with the horned god though as well. That's what I call him. So just kind of wild, masculine kind of nature archetype that I just call the horned god at this point. But I feel like there are a lot of deities like him through different cultures. And so I'll kind of bring them in at different points as well, like sort of use their faces or whatever. So yeah. But the Morrigan is the goddess that I'm working with currently.
And do you work with her in one aspect or like a whole, or do you just see her as the Morrigan, or do you work with
separate bits? So so to begin with, I saw her as one facet, and I was calling her the Morrigan, but I realized sometimes later that it was her her aspect as Maka that was coming through, or Maka. And I actually have with me my little horse here that I have on my altar. Brought her in. So she's been the predominant kind of aspect that's come through so far. But just recently, like in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know where this is going yet, but I have this little ritual where I sit down and I go through these prayer beads that I have. And there's 9 beads, and then like, hang on, I'll show you here. There's like a bead and then 9 beads across, and then this bead. So what I do is sort of focus on the Morrigan as a whole on the first main bead, and then I go through the 3 of her aspects 3 times, and I just kind of say her name, and I see a face for each as well. And I'm seeing like a lot of animal energies are tied up with her for me at the moment. So when I see the Morrigan as a whole, for me, the crow energy is the one that is predominant. Like I always see a crow with that. And with Nemain, I'm seeing snake. So snake's kind of been the visual that's come through. Maka is the horse. And then with Babe, I'm actually now, and this has been only something that's happened in the last few weeks as well, I'm seeing the fox. So that makes sense to me because fox I kind of really see as kind of a crone-like energy. You know, that kind of shifting and the in-between and the darkness and that kind of thing. So yeah, so I don't know where it's going. Like I haven't done any deeper work with the other aspects yet, but yeah, so predominantly Maka, but usually I don't call her that. I call her the Morrigan, but that's the face I see, kind of middle-age-ish, red hair, the horse. So yeah.
So for anybody who's not keeping up, I have a blog and I mainly work with Bave. I mainly work with the crone, death, underworld elements of the Morrigan. That's where I feel comfortable. That's where I feel at home. I kind of have slight interactions with the other elements of her, but that's where I'm at home. So it was interesting that you said fox to me, because particularly on the blog, I've been focusing on fox energy. I've got a new blog post coming out and I don't want to like give away too much. But I've had some pretty tactile experiences that have been both visual, tasting, journeying with fox energy and rabbit energy as well. So the fox and the rabbit have kind of been a fear and the hunt. So the hunted and the hunter element that has been present for me with Babe's energy very, very strongly for a month or two. And it's kind of been blossoming into these insane coffee divinations that I've now got 3 or 4 of up on the Instagram, and you can see rabbits in them. And we've been talking about how we are the fox and we are the rabbit. Or I have. Say we, me, myself, and I, and the blog. Well,
I love that.
I've been talking about it with Chris a lot as well. So, and there's been a lot of fox energy, a lot of master of shadows. The fox to me is very associated with Bave in terms of he is a master of the hedgerow. He's a magician of the hedgerow. He can step between the in-between places with ease, and he's nocturnal, so he's at home in the dark. This being said, both Owlvine and I work in, I think, what would consider a evolutionary spiritual path, in that we don't necessarily only take animals that turn up in the mythos, the mythology. So you're unlikely to find fox mentioned in the mythology for anybody who's like, is it present there? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure there's one story with Brigid and a fox, but I don't think there are any with Morrigan. But there's the whole scavenger element. So crows were scavengers on the battlefield, and the Celts drew a belief that they would consume the dead and take them to the Morrigan, and that's the underworld link. So to me, fox kind of has that scavenger energy as well. So little bit of a side tangent, but there you go. So working with Mocha, I believe. I always get yelled at for pronouncing it wrong. But
oh, look, I'm Australian, so I'm like Macca. Anyway, yes.
Do you feel that she has called you to work on certain parts of yourself, like to have certain threads and themes and lessons really revolved around her energy? Because she to me feels different, very, very different in terms of like when comparing her to Bave, because she's much more of a solar deity, and whereas Bave is more of your underworld shadowy element, whereas Mocha has much more of her, you know, this solar. It's very difficult to describe it. It's kind of like this energy rather than this energy. So it's very like proud and steadfast, maybe.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you say that, because with her, like, even when I've like, because I do get visuals, so when I've seen her even at night, there actually has been a lot of light around her. Like it's like I can see her with daytime eyes. So that's really interesting. I've never actually picked that up before.
Oh, that's
like realized
awesome.
that. Yeah, so I mean, originally, I mean, okay, so my kind of introduction to the Morrigan, and I'm not sure if I'd seen her at this point yet, but it was around mother stuff, like big time mummy issues. And I had this whole weekend, like I had like this spiritual retreat kind of thing. Like I was at home, but I had the weekend to myself, and it was the most intense weekend of my life. Like I literally felt like we were walking down a corridor and she was lifting up a trapdoor, and there was just all this stuff that came out. And then I kind of, you know, rode that wave and then was okay and kind of integrated, and then it was like the next trapdoor, and I don't know how many times it happened. It was mostly that kind of mum stuff, which I feel like was really, really like deep, old things, you know, from when I was really small. So, I mean, I feel like with her, like I so feel like she's her predominant energy to me is that personal sovereignty. That's kind of where I'm at in my experience with her so far. And I guess all the things that we've kind of been working on and through and around have been about that personal sovereignty. So, I mean, I don't know, because I don't have anything to compare it to, like, because I haven't worked with her other aspects. But I guess in that solar way, it's almost like bringing all that stuff to light for me. Like, even if it's just for my own self, like if I don't, you know, there's a lot of things I haven't necessarily shared with people at this point, but it's like bringing all that stuff up and out, because you know, most of my life has been lived in darkness. You know, I have always, up until pretty recently, that's where I've lived. And I know it may not seem like that. Like when I come onto my my channel, you know, I'm I guess a certain kind of part of me or whatever. I haven't sort of shared a lot of that stuff yet. So people, you know, I know what it's like, you know, when you see someone, you're like, oh, there's this bright, sunshiny person, you know, their life must be amazing. Well, life has been hell. It's been hell. So I feel like, you know, that's where I was comfortable, in that kind of dark kind of space. And I feel like, yeah, you know, there is that aspect of solar kind of bringing me out into more light, because I never really stepped out there myself before that, if that makes sense. So
dragon kicking and screaming. Yeah. So I do want to touch on where you live, but I think this is a thread that we should probably follow down the proverbial rabbit hole with regards to, a lot of people don't realize how difficult it actually really truly is when working with Morrigan. I don't know if you've come across this or not. I imagine so, because when people come to me and they're like, I really want to work with the Goddess Morrigan, and I'm like, are you sure? Like,
yeah.
And it really is one of the equally most difficult and yet most rewarding relationships with deity that I have ever had. And I assume that's the same for you. So how do you in your path working sort of make sense of that? Because to outside people, particularly those who work with maybe other solar deities, for example, or the lighter deities, if you like, how do you even start to express that to other people when discussing deity? Because a lot of people kind of be like, isn't that taking you to a negative place? And so how do you address that?
I mean, I haven't sort of really spoken about her much to other people, just because I feel like there's a lot of, like, you know, Mrs. Know-it-alls around her, you know, who like to be like, so I'm just
not me.
And I feel like I can understand it now that I work with her, because she is, and look, other deities are as well, but I don't know. For me, yeah, I have experienced a whole nother level of like personal goddess, because she like gets in your shit and like, whoa. So I can understand why people feel that, I suppose, possessiveness or whatever about their ideas, or their experiences, I should say. But in terms of like that dark aspect, the thing that I say, like, I mean, like the whole darkness and light thing, you know, we've kind of like, I know you've touched on this before, there is so much more to darkness than negativity. Like negativity can be an aspect of darkness. To me, darkness is mystery and depth and personal self and deep soul level and cosmos and space and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So when we're talking about like a darker aspect of deity, like, I mean, whoa, like it doesn't mean negativity. Like, yeah, there are parts of it that may feel like that, I don't know, but it's about addressing all those things that sit in the subconscious, you know, that are under those layers. There is so much to this like dark realm as such, and it's not a big bad scary place. It can feel like that, but that's because it's that mystery, like, you know, the things unseen, the shadows. And there is so much richness in that place, and so much joy, and so much truth, and just, you know, profound things waiting to be seen. And maybe, you know, brought back up into the light might be a nice way to think about it, or whatever. But yeah, to me, darkness, it's a beautiful place. You know, nighttime is my favorite time, and how much beauty do, you know, witches, for example, find in the nighttime? That is darkness. You know, there's so many wonderful things there. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Yeah, it's not about negativity, it's about mystery.
So one of the things that I've come to be thinking about lately is fear. And Babe deals with a lot of fear work, like a lot of fear work. Like she does the whole screaming, howling banshee, scares men to death, literally in the lore. So for me, she brings fear to the fore. And I think why a lot of people determine that the Goddess Morrigan is evil, because I've had some people come to me asking me about this, like, is she evil? Other people have said she's evil, is actually because she forces us to confront what we're afraid of. And that fear is a reflection of perhaps the weakest parts of ourselves. So when being forced to look at the weakest part of ourselves, we can resent that. It's a natural human thing to be like, I don't want to deal with this, or I want to flee from it, you know, flight or fight response. And the Morrigan is like, you're gonna fight with it. And some people would rather leave it and like walk away from it or flee from it. So I think there's a fear thing that comes into this, like people being forced to face what they are afraid of, or mistakes that they've made, and they're afraid what that means and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Like, okay, wait, visual. So like when you said the banshee there, like, and the same with crows, like being like this bringer of death, right? People like they're the bringers of death. Well, actually, they're just the messengers of death. They don't bring death. It's just like, hey, it's coming. And so I feel like that kind of ties in. And yeah, I know there are a lot of people that are afraid to go to those darker parts of themselves. And I've actually had a few people, I don't know if it was concerning the Morrigan necessarily, but kind of, I think it was more just like shadow work in general, and talking about how, I feel like I need to do shadow work, but I'm not ready. I'm too afraid to. All that stuff's in there. To me, like, I mean, so much of my ugly was like on display for myself throughout my life. So I'm like, hey, shadow work, like, all right, like, you know, and some things are like a slap in the face, and you're like, whoa, I didn't know if I wanted to know that about myself. But hey, like, it's there anyway. Like, knowing about it doesn't make it any more or less true. That's kind of how I feel about it. So better to get it up and out and deal with it, so that it's not something lurking in the shadows. And yeah, sometimes it is really scary, but I think that's why it's so wonderful to work with a darker goddess, because yes, they may say, all right, let's start dealing with this stuff, but they'll be there for you as well. You know, there's that helping hand there. So while it can be scary, if you kind of want to, what is it, like, go to another level in your life, I suppose, something like, or keep growing, you know, it's something that is good to do, and it feels good too. Like when you get through that fear, like when you see that fear and it scares you, and you step on through it, and you do something that you couldn't before, you're just like, yes, and it's like the best feeling in the entire world. So yeah, there's a lot of beauty, I think, in fear, because fear, I think, is just a flag post of where to go. Go in the direction of your fear, you know,
and break on through.
Yeah.
So we'll touch now, I think, about keeping an eye on time and things, because I did want to talk about working as a southern witch with regards to the Morrigan. So obviously some people are less than pleasant about foreigners, and that includes me as a foreigner working with the Goddess Morrigan. And obviously your environment, your physical environment, is completely other to the starting point from mythos and lore that is presented with the Goddess Morrigan. So how do you align that within your path, like being connected, because obviously particularly Mocha is very much sovereignty of the land, being connected to the land and the place that you live. So how do you incorporate that element of your path into your Morriganic path walking?
Well, it was interesting to start off with, because when I was reading the myths, like they felt like very foreign, you know. Now that area of the world is somewhere I've always been drawn to, but I don't live there. So there was that kind of, I don't know what the word is. But
disconnect?
Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, feeling of disconnect. So, and I really felt drawn to that, the sovereign land aspect as well. And so I was like, well, how can I do this? And quite recently, it's probably been like a month or so now, I felt told I have a jar on my altar now, and my altar is predominantly set up around Morrigan energies. And it's interesting looking at it now too, because I set it up without much idea of what was going on, and since I've set it up, all these things are coming out. There's a lot of fox on there. Okay, fox makes sense. There's a lot of this and that. I'm like, okay, so all these things are coming together now, which is cool. You know, if you follow your intuition, eventually it makes sense. So I've been told to have this jar, which I've kind of decorated a little bit, and each day I go outside and just stand in the dirt and kind of get my hands in the dirt, rub it all over myself, and I'm focused on her in that time. And it's been amazing actually, because, you know, I was feeling that disconnect with like, well, I was like, well, I don't feel like she's a goddess of this land because, you know, it's Australia. It's very, very different. But since doing that, like I feel her more in the land now. And this is a very like personal thing. And I kind of like, I don't care if other people disagree or whatever, because I'm like, ultimately, this is my spiritual experience. My whole spiritual experience is about me and spirit, you know, like I don't really care what other people say. And so far I've been lucky. Like I've not really had a lot of nitpickers or anything, which has been nice. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, but since doing that, and kind of, so each day I collect a little bit of dirt, sorry. So I do that, put it in the jar. And yeah, I'm noticing a deeper connection now. Like as soon as I go outside now, I feel more of her. I live in an area which has crows nesting. Like we have a large tree. It's off our property, but it overlooks our property, and there are crows nesting there, and a lot of crow energy around here, which to me is very cool because I've always loved crows, but where I used to live, there was hardly any. It was by the sea, so it was a lot of seagulls and like a very occasional crow. So moving here, I don't really remember seeing them to begin with. And then I did start seeing them, and I had this kind of whole vision quest with what I realized now, like, or realized later, was the Morrigan, and was gifted actually a deceased crow that day, which was like the most incredible experience of my life, and something to go into a different day. But yeah, so I felt like she was around in the air, you know, but I guess kind of getting out there physically in the dirt, it feels like that energy has grounded. Although in saying that, I haven't, like when I go from this place, I don't feel as connected in terms of land energy with her. It's more like this space. So, and I haven't been doing this for very long, so I'll be interested to see kind of how it develops and changes. But yeah.
That makes me wonder if you've created your own little, energetically speaking, you've created a anchor to the Morrigan through your actions to the land around you. So that you've kind of channeled down Morriganic energy and created a connection to the land that, yeah, I'm getting shivers up my back, that creates kind of like, this is kind of my little kingdom, and I know that Morrigan rules over my little kingdom, and as well as me, and grants me the gift of sovereignty, and then collecting to that and connecting to that. So it's like bringing that piece of land into her altar space is then creating like an energetic mini kingdom in the earth that you're surrounded by, maybe.
Oh yes, no, that totally, yeah. I reckon that's exactly what it is. Because as soon as you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, yep, totally. That's cool.
So everybody now needs to go outside and like mark their land. That's awesome. So I feel like a lot of people who are connected deeply to the Morrigan kind of have this energy of a certain a drawing to a certain kind of witchcraft, and it's kind of like the dirt witchcraft, the bone witchcraft, the blood witchcraft. It's sometimes the types of witchcraft that some people have moved away from. Some people have sanitized a little bit and sort of go rather than really get. It's kind of like, it's really difficult to explain now. I'm like, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. And this has come about, this thought process, because of you talking about taking dirt, but it's very much like putting your fingers in the dirt and being connected to that deep rootedness. It's very much being aware of your blood and the power of it. It's very much for a lot of us is coming into contact with like bones and death and dead creatures, like you mentioned, and having to realize that perhaps through the sort of sanitization of society now, we're a little bit more removed from the life and death processes all around us. And I feel like, particularly when you work with dark goddesses such as the Morrigan, she really does try and steer you back to that sort of understanding of life and death and the magic and the energies around it. Have you found, like, within the process of working with her, you've been taken back to like this more, I don't want to call it dark witchcraft because I really dislike the term, but that kind of tactile, very, I don't know, earthy, life and death style witchcraft?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like I was drawn to it before I knew she was around. But I guess I was more afraid of it as well, just in terms of like, what will people think, and this image and, all that kind of crap. Yeah, so the longer I'm kind of walking along with her, I'm like, this is what I love to do. And when I do work like that, like I can feel the power, in it, for myself, very much so. And like, it just feels like my soul just kind of flicks back to this primal space. It's the drums and bare feet, pumping the earth, and that kind of thing. Like, I get shivers thinking about it, like that really, that primal, foresty, the dirt, the earth smell, bones, blood, all of that. I really enjoy working like that. And it's something that I don't really share publicly, but we don't need to, kind of thing. Like, some people feel really drawn to share that kind of stuff, some people don't. For me at this stage, like, I'm not afraid to share it, but I just feel like it's such a raw, deep part of myself, and that's why it's it's kind of, for me, or if I'm having a conversation sort of like this, I'm happy to let's talk about it, especially with other people who do it. It's cool to find other people who kind of are in that space as well. And like you said, I think I don't know, I just feel like that's the space that witchcraft was born, it doesn't make it the right place to be in at all. Like, people don't have to practice like that, but it's something, it's like the roots of it or something. I don't know, I love it.
I do too. We'll probably get lots of comments underneath like, no. No. But again, this is this fear thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, it's taking you to a place of witchcraft that you might be hesitant to because of the fear that's been instilled from you, either by your own self or from outside influences, maybe. So is there any element of working with the Morrigan that you find has been difficult to incorporate, like something that was perhaps already part of your life, your lifestyle, who you are, or just things around you. And it's been kind of difficult for you to initially, perhaps, and then you kind of see the underlying linkage to your more organic path working. Has there been anything where you've been like, this doesn't quite fit with how I feel that the Morrigan path perhaps was supposed to be, and then you've come to realize that it's not how it was supposed to be, but this is how it is for you personally?
Probably the whole thing to start with. Like, because I learned about her, I read the myths and things, and I really did strongly feel that it was her. And because of all of the stuff out there, I was kind of like, I don't know about this for me, but in the end I was kind of like, all right, no, I really feel like this is where it's going. I'm just going to have a little faith and step into it and see where we go. And my path with her so far, really, like, it's a deeply personal, evolving, like you said, that really evolutionary kind of thing that I'm doing. There isn't probably a lot I do that is like reconstructed or something that is kind of within the myths. There are certain animals that are around that are associated with her, like in the mythology, but mostly it has been because it is predominantly at the moment kind of our work together is personal sovereignty. And when I came into paganism and witchcraft pretty much at the same time, I really, truly, deeply, my biggest thing was I don't want to be following anyone else's religion. I really need to explore myself and my own voice. And so I guess that's what kind of scared me when I first felt like it was the Morrigan coming, because I was like, oh shit, like there's so much. And I guess the thing with her is there is a lot of, comparatively, there is a lot of mythology around her, sort of surviving, I suppose, or things that have been written later on, but around her. There are people who have written books these days, like modern books about her, and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of thought currently about her. So that kind of, made me feel nervous to start off with. But I've just kind of done my own thing with her. And I just talk to her and say, hey, you tell me what you want me to do. Another thing was like the whole, a lot of people talk about her being quite demanding. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this, because I didn't like to admit it for a long time, but I'm pretty lazy. I'm not good with sticking with things. But she has called me after the first little while. I didn't feel like I needed to do anything for her regularly. But as of late, it's been like, I'm the center of your altar. Okay. Yep. And these are the practices that you're doing each day for me. Okay. And since doing that, like, I feel like the relationship has gone to a new level. And it's not difficult. Like, it felt like it was going to be difficult at the start, like to do this kind of thing. Cause I'm really like, I don't have much Virgo in energy. Like, I would like a lot more. I say it, my son is Virgo sun, and he's got his Mercury in Virgo as well, and like, so that's been a real lesson for me, kind of having that around me and going, man, like, I wish I had more of that, because I'm like water and fire and I'm all over the place. But yeah, kind of going through the process with her, it's been really nice, and I don't feel like a guilt if I don't do it. It's more like, well, if you don't do it, then you're not going to reap the benefits of doing it, which is building that relationship. So yeah.
So I have huge resistances to doing things in an orderly, structured way, which is perhaps one of the least Virgoan things about me. Like, I really don't like, I must do it this day and this day and this day and this day. And that's everything. That's life in general, spirituality, everything. I can't. It gets under my skin and it makes me feel like this, and I don't want to do it. You're putting cages around me, and so yeah. So it's interesting how differently people come to this, thinking, I need to be more structured with this. And I'm like, no, I need to be less structured with this. I will sing for the goddess when I feel like it. I will I give her offerings of whiskey every day. So I do that every day, and I don't have a problem doing that every day. So that's the one thing that I do every day. But then there'll be certain times when I will sing, certain times when I will drum, because I have the beautiful drum that Laura Daligan made for me. And I will drum for her, and that feels deeply connective in like a heartbeat kind of way. If it's like connecting to the heartbeat of spirituality for me with drumming, it's beautiful.
Yes.
And then sometimes it's just talking, and sometimes it's just prayer, and sometimes it's literally videos like, there's something we need to discuss with the masses and you need to put this out there, and other people will then come and we will chat about it. And I'm like, okay, all right, we're going to do this. And sometimes it's things that matter, like on a social level. So we talked about LGBT and certain people coming under attack, saying the Morrigan wouldn't work with LGBT is something that somebody was told, and something that I heavily disagree with.
Oh yeah.
So how, or what are some of the ways in which you give offering that you're happy to share? Because this is something that people often ask quite a lot about, like how do you go about that giving of gifts, or what kind of things really appeal to you in terms of offering and honoring the Goddess Morrigan?
Well, at the moment, something I'm doing, something really simple, is I have incense set aside for her. It's just a stick incense, and so I burn one of those each day at the moment. And I sort of have like a little, it's like a cauldron it's sitting in, and I've got like a stone in there, and there's a little thing in there, and so each day I kind of clean it out. And what I'm actually doing at the moment, I don't know where this is going yet either, so I feel like there's always like something, like a reason why behind, but any incense ash that falls in there, I just kind of break up a little bit and just mix in there. So the salt at the moment is like this beautiful brownie color. So I do that for her. And I guess in that, I feel like my time, so actually just devoting, at the moment, it's anywhere between 5 and generally like 15 minutes a day, to sitting with her. And sometimes I'll do spell work after, or, you know, like whatever, like incorporate that into my kind of magical practice as well. But it's like setting that time aside for her. That's probably the biggest one. Because it was something that I was so like funny about doing to begin with, just like, oh, you know, like the pressure of spending time. But it feels really good, you know. It's like just connecting and like getting into that headspace. So for me, I do that at my altar, just because it's a space that I feel connected. It's a space where there isn't any other anchors, you know, like daily life anchors. I'm not thinking about anything else when I'm in that space. When I do that, I light a candle. So that's another very simple thing. And another thing I'm doing at the moment, which I don't know if you could really call it an offering, but it's not really, but it's something I'm working into, that is actually doing affirmations into a little mirror that I keep on that altar with her as well. So there are a few, you know, I sort of feel like I'm going through a process of being instructed, I suppose, to bring different affirmations into myself, I suppose. So that's something else that I do always before her, you know, before her space, is doing those affirmations. Yeah, but the biggest one I would say is time at the moment for me.
And what does personal sovereignty mean to you in terms of working with Morrigan? Because I think we've touched on it a few times, and we've talked a little bit about affirmation there. So when working with Morrigan, what does personal sovereignty mean to you?
For me, it's about empowerment. It's about claiming myself. It's like sitting in my seat of power. It's about accepting myself wholly, kind of, I guess, that shadow work thing, you know, like not denying any part of myself, not seeing any part of myself as bad. And this is a process, definitely. Like, I don't think we necessarily just arrive at this place and stay there. It's a constant thing. Yeah, and I think owning my energy, being aware of what I'm putting out there, whether it's to other people or, you know, to myself in the mirror kind of thing. kind of solidifying my own bubble, I suppose. That's what personal sovereignty means to me, and doing the work to create the healing that I need in various ways in my life. So whether that be physical or spiritual, emotional, all of those things.
So I've just got a message on Facebook saying they can't access the live chat. And we've not had any.
Happened? The other one wasn't working, but this one is up. So I don't know, because the original one I clicked on isn't working either, but there is another one that is obviously working.
Okay.
They're right next to each other on my feed. So
I can't see it for some reason. I go on my video manager and I can't see it, which is how people usually go through, right? They go to the video manager and click it, and yeah, I can't see it on mine. I don't know why not. Until I post it, I can't see the chat, which is why I have people link me. But I've got my Facebook on my iPad, so if anybody who's watching and has me on, or Owlvine on Facebook, and you desperately want to ask a question, which would be in the next 5 minutes, do so now and we'll try and get hold of them. So sorry about that. I think it's Mercury retrograde. I've never had it be quite so argumentative.
Yep.
Okay. Have any parts of working about personal sovereignty surprised you? Things that came to the fore and you like, I really hadn't realized that, or I really hadn't thought about that until working with the Morrigan kind of brought that up for you, that obviously you're comfortable talking about because it's personal. And I will mention now, there are a lot of things that I work with Morrigan that I don't share, and I share a lot, possibly more than a lot of people, but there are still things that I will not talk about that I work with Morrigan that are much more personal. So I just put it out there.
Yeah. All right, I think the biggest thing for me was when mum stuff came up. Like I was like, you know, I'm a child of divorce ×2, and that kind of thing. So I was like, oh yeah, you know, the typical thing is, oh, you know, like because of that you'll have father issues, and that's something that I was told growing up, whatever. But the stuff about my mum, like really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I didn't realize that. And to me, like I felt like when I went through that, you know, seeing that, I connected with a deeper part of myself than I ever had before. So that, you know, there's a lot more to kind of go through with that. Like that's like a huge area, but sort of having some of that come up and feeling that pain and letting it out through tears, allowed a deeper connection to myself. And I think it was just after I had done that, I had this moment with myself in the mirror. And I don't think this is something I've shared before, but I connected with myself in the mirror, and gosh, it would have been the weirdest thing if anyone had seen, but I looked like really deeply into my own eyes, and I realized for the first time that the connection I'd been looking for was in myself, you know. So I had this like incredibly intense, I don't even know how long it was, moments of just like crying and looking at myself and kind of having this conversation of love with myself. That for me was like, it's been a huge beginning, and I think really kind of thrust me into that whole exploration of personal sovereignty, because it was something that I'd kind of like, I knew I was looking for, but once I realized that everything I need and want is within myself, like whether it's actually of me or something that I can connect with through me, if that makes sense. That was massive for me.
So I can actually see all the chat now, which is wonderful. It's
Yay.
My Mercury retrograde. I can see it. So in a couple of minutes, we'll put questions to Owlvine, and you can roast her, and I'll sit here and be like, be nice. But a question that I get a lot, and I assume you get a lot, is how did you know it was the Morrigan? which I find a really difficult question to answer. But I would like to hear how you think you knew it was the Morrigan.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a process. I'm going to say that before anybody says anything, but
yes, I definitely agree with that, and I think that's a great way to start it. It's absolutely a process. You know, with spirit, like, I think there are times when things are like just smack you in the head, so obvious, but most of the time, you know, it's a process. It's something you've got to go through. So I feel like she first came to me last February, so not this one gone, but the one before. And I saw her and what I believed to be Baba Yaga at the time, and I was like, ooh, I don't know about this, right? So I kind of had a conversation, and in the end, I decided to kind of go the Baba Yaga route, just because I was like, Morrigan, I don't know about this, and it was that whole it was fear, but not the typical fear. It was fear of like all these other people being around her currently already. And, you know, like I talked about earlier, that kind of thing. So I was like a bit, ooh, I don't know. And then I think it was 7 months after that, I felt like she came up again. Now, I should have got my journal out because I wrote about it, but it was a process. So Crow was one thing. And I do want to say, like, when I say Crow, there are a lot of deities that are associated with Crow, and there are a lot of different energies that are associated with Crow, not necessarily deities either. So that's something to look into. That's part of the process. So when something comes up as like a thing, like maybe you see horses all the time, maybe you see crows, maybe you see this or that, like, go into it and have a look and see what, like, for me, I get intuitive hits. I guess that's a good way to describe them. Like, I feel like it's like something jumps out at me, you know, like, ping, this is a thing, you know, I feel it. So whenever you get those kind of intuitive hits, go in that direction and see where it leads. So I was getting these different things come up, and I journaled about it and was like, you know, Morrigan, is this you? Like, what is going on? I spoke to people, like I spoke to you, Joey, and a few other people who I knew worked with her, and were kind of like, well, can you tell me about what happened for you? Because I don't know. And I eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? Like, after like weeks of kind of asking and wondering and going, I'm not sure, and journaling and that kind of thing, I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure it's her. So I just spoke to her. I think I lit a candle. I may not have, and said, look, Morrigan, I think it's you. You know, can you let me know? Because I'm not really sure. Like, if you want me to work with you at this time, can you let me know? And that's, again, where the intuitive hits will come in. Like, there'll be things that you just know. It'll be her, it'll be someone else, or it'll be something else altogether. And then it was like within a couple of days of doing that, or maybe the next day or something, I knew it was her. So it was that intuitive felt sense of knowing. And it's actually kind of funny. So like when I dedicated to her, I kind of did it accidentally, because I was doing this, like, I wrote down this thing to say to her, and it was basically about, yes, you know, I'm stepping into working with you now. And then I realized I had, because when I wrote it really stream of consciousness, and I realized I'd written the word dedication in there, and I said it, and I was like, hang on a second, like, that's when I realized I'd written it in there. I was like, wait. So it just kind of all happened from there. And then it was, I think that was like maybe a Wednesday, and that weekend was when I had that massive, like, trap doors happening, and like snot and ugly cry, and like it was amazing. It was the most beautiful weekend of my life. So I know it was her.
So I'm going to respond to one of the comments quickly, because I think this is kind of relevant. Someone's talking about major life changes, and with regards to the Morrigan. So the Morrigan, to me, tends to go to people. Okay, but this is one of these things that I can talk about for literally about an hour or 2 hours. So I'm going to try and condense myself as much as possible. But people who find themselves in in-between life spaces often are who are like, I think the Morrigan's coming to me. And I'm like, are you in transition? Is like one of the first things that I think about, because often when we're looking from going one aspect of life to another, or we're dealing with something, horrifying or difficult, or it's just all sorts of things that life churns up and throws at us, that is often when the Morrigan seems to come in the in-between spaces. And for me, she is an in-between goddess. She's a shapeshifter. That's what I would primarily describe her as. A lot of people like, she's the goddess of war, and yes, she is, but to me, she's the goddess of the in-between spaces. She's a shapeshifter, and war is an in-between space. It's a volatile space between peace and war and the churning of social unrest. So it's very much about the in-between spaces to me. And if you know, there is a almost plate shifting, or like a huge life-altering event going on, or even an internal life-altering event going on, changes within self, that's very typical. So are there any questions for Miss Owlvine from the chat as we're approaching about the hour mark? I know we were a bit late starting, so any questions?
We've done well, all things considered, I think.
I think we've covered most things that people have actually talked about, considering that I've not had access to the chat because of Mercury retrograde.
Because of all that, yeah.
The Death card, by the way, is my favorite card from tarot, and it has always been my favorite card in tarot decks, and I have to like the Death card in tarot decks or I won't even consider them. And that was one of those hints, very small on the scale of things, but it was one of those hints of who my goddess was.
I love that. It's the same for me too, actually. I love the Death card, and I the tarot deck that I work with, I have only two, but my main one is the Druid Craft tarot, and I adore the Death card in there. It's just,
that's my first ever tarot deck.
Oh really? There you go. It's a great deck.
So I work with the Wild Unknown, and the Death in there is actually a crow in decomposition, so
nice.
It's perfect for Morrigan energy. Oh, come on. People must have Morrigan questions.
Morrigan questions.
I'll make some up. The ones that I get asked a lot. No, they're not going to ask any questions. They're like, no, we're happy. We're good. What would you advise somebody who was beginning to follow the Morrigan and they came up against sort of accusations of her being evil? Because that's something I've had to answer of late.
Well, I mean, my thing is, I guess, go with your gut, go with your experience, look into the whole evil darkness thing. I mean, and that's kind of what I did, and why I believe that, you know, darkness doesn't equal evil, because darkness is so much more. And the thing is, like, the whole evil thing, the way we think about it, I think, in Western society has a lot to do with Christianity. So there is, within Christianity, at least as far as I've experienced it, like the people I know around me and my experience, there is a real fear of death. Like, death is a really bad thing. It's something that should be avoided at all costs, that kind of thing. So I guess kind of know the background of evil, I guess, is the thing, or just like avoid those people. That's kind of what I did. I kind of battened down the hatches and was like, I'm just going to experience this for myself and see where I go. And you know, I think that sometimes people want far too much input from outside sources, and I really get that. I really get it. But you need to get to the point where it is between you and spirit. Approach that spirit in faith, and say to them, like, if you're feeling afraid, I feel a bit afraid here, I really want to do the best thing for me, I invite only what is for my highest good into the space, into myself, and we will go from there, you know. Yeah.
So I drive people crazy because people come and ask me, and I'm like, well, what do you think it means? Like, it's much more important to be in tune with your own intuition. And what I tell a lot of people, I mean, and nearly every single person who ever asked me about deity, I'm like, trust yourself. Trust your instincts, trust what you think of a situation, trust the symbolism that means something to you, because what an apple means to you doesn't mean the same thing to somebody else. What a crow means to you doesn't mean the same thing to anyone else. And to address the crow thing that came up earlier, crows were the last symbol that came up for me. And it started with wolves. In terms of animal totems and magic, it started with wolf magic, and I later found out that in nature, crows follow wolves around, so like scavenging off the kills and things. So for me, it was like a nature cycle that we went through all the other imagery first and ended with crow energy. So for me, it wasn't crows up front. It was kind of like the last thing. And I try and alliterate that as much as possible, because it's not necessarily the initial message. So I've heard that you see crows if she wants to talk to you, possibly. Not necessarily, but very possibly. Any messages in other forms?
Yeah.
what kind of messages, I assume? So I will say dreams is something a lot of people get. I didn't. Like, I'll get visualization rather than dreaming. The Morrigan has been in my dreams twice the entire time I've worked with her, and I was like, why not in my dreams? And she's like, we don't need to do that. I just boom. Okay. Messages are very subjective, though. This is another one of these things. Like, if you think you're getting a message and that to you feels like a message, trust yourself. Because I can't tell you this message and this message and this message necessarily. I can give examples of things that I've experienced, but like we've said earlier in this thing, it's highly personalized spiritual path working.
Absolutely. And you'll like, the thing is, this stuff, if it's coming from spirit, it's getting filtered through your subconscious and coming up into your conscious. So like the symbols are all in your subconscious, so that, yeah, like you said, they'll mean different things culturally or through personal experience, through life, whatever. That includes colors, animals, like whatever, everything. So I think it can be helpful sometimes to look up what things mean. Again, if you get those intuitive hits, like if you're reading it and something stands out to you, like, ooh, okay. But I really think with all this spiritual stuff, the biggest thing is to sit with it. I think a lot of this kind of consumerism mindset has really come into spirituality now too, like where we need to know, and like instant gratification. So if something comes through now, I got to know what it is now, and I totally get it. I've so been there. I do it all the time, and like get slaps on the hand, like stop it. You're just going to have to sit with this. And this is kind of what's been happening, like I mentioned with my altar before. Like I was like, all right, this is how it's like, I'm just setting it up like this, like intuitively I know to do that. And it's a process, and things are coming out to me like, oh, this is why this is here, and this is an energy that's around that I'm kind of working with. And it's slowly over the weeks and of me spending time thinking about it, and in that space it's becoming obvious what it means. But it does take time, and I think it's so beautiful and so rich if you allow the messages to just sit and to stew. Keep journaling. I think journaling is really, really helpful, because you can kind of put out your ideas of what things mean then too, and it will become obvious over time. No one's trying to play any tricks on you, you know. It's just like, I think spirituality is a process. It's about spending time, and it's about going deep.
So would the Morrigan get along with other goddesses in circle, a goddess such as Isis from the Egyptian pantheon?
Would they get along? Look, for me, with the whole like mixing pantheons and deities and things, I say go with your intuition. You won't know till you try it. And honestly, I think for some people it doesn't work, and for some people it does. So in some people's experiences, no. In some people's, absolutely. Just, I don't know, introduce them to each other and see what happens. Because the thing is, again, like, they're different energies, but I believe that they are of the same thing. So for you in your life, there may be a beautiful purpose in those two energies kind of mixing and coming together. So if you feel both, then absolutely, like see where that takes you. And again, if you are feeling afraid, like I always just approach it very honestly and say, hey, I'm a bit nervous about this. For my highest good, I'm going forth in this, and you know, please lead me and guide me. I'm not trying to offend anyone here. I'm just, you know. So yeah, that's what I would do.
I do have a video on it for anybody who wants to hear me blather on about that. What I am going to say about this is, for me, Goddess Morrigan has been very all-encompassing. So for me, there's been an element of I don't work with any other deity without her permission. Like, I've had deities that have shown up, Hades, that I felt haven't had her permission, Hades. And I'm like, did you ask her permission, Hades? And I'm getting a whole load of silence, and I'm just like, no, like I don't need that headache. Like that there was like a conflict thing going on there, and like a testing thing going on there, and I was like, So it's one of these. It is highly personal, and I'm not going to tell you can't, and I'm not going to tell you that she won't allow it, because she might. If she's like, right, you need this, and I'm bringing in this energy for this, she'll do it. She, you know, she's a goddess. Who are we to argue? But for me, she's kind of been all-encompassing. Like, I haven't felt that I needed another mother goddess, personally, because she has been so encompassing. Okay, this might be my perception, but why do you think so many magical practitioners work with dark goddess energy, Hell, Hecate, the Morrigan? Are there commonalities in life experiences? Okay, so firstly, I don't find that. I know plenty of people who work with Gaia or Venus, or you know, the light side of goddesses. That they definitely do. They're out there. It's just that I think of late there has been a focus on the dark goddess energies for a number of reasons. Perhaps where we are in like a cultural place right now, like there's a lot of kind of warlike energies that are going on in the world right now, and there's been a lot of like struggle for like social freedoms and liberations, and kind of like restrictions of those coming back in, and the churning of society has been happening a lot right now. And I think that maybe why we're focusing on the dark gods and goddesses a bit more, but I don't think that there's like a unfair divide of people who are interested in dark goddesses necessarily. So I'll throw that over to you. Do you think there are more dark goddess practitioners, and why?
I don't think so. I'm kind of like you. Like, yeah, lately I've probably heard these names spoken about a little bit more, but most of the people I know don't work with, you know, what could be called deemed darker deities. However, I do think that, okay, so I feel like this whole spirituality, I feel like is going through like this pendulum swing, right? So we came from, in the terms of the West, we came from extreme Christianity, Western culture. So there was like this, and witchcraft began over this side, going, oh, hang on a second, we're not dark at all. Like we're not dark.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when it came out into that. So, and then there's kind of like this almost pendulum swing back again, going, well, hang on a second, actually, like all that light stuff, that's kind of, you know, ridiculous. Like we're, you know, and I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying a lot of people, is kind of like this happening, where people are like, well, actually, I want to explore all the dark stuff, because I'm kind of like, I feel like the light has been way over represented in, you know, I don't know, religion or whatever. I'm wanting to go more dark. So I feel like there is kind of this pendulum swing happening. And I feel like we all go through it within our own very personal experience as well. I've experienced that for myself too, and kind of getting to the point of finding that, like, what my balance is. Yeah, so I don't feel like there is like, yeah, I don't think most witches or magical practitioners are necessarily working with darker goddesses, but like you said, I think there are more than there was. some years ago, but I think we are kind of experiencing a bit of that sort of rebalancing pendulum swing thing happening.
And sort of the follow-up question to that was about, do you think there are common factors or commonalities within personality that draw many practitioners to this energy? So I'm going to say that this is a little bit more on the heavy side, but I think a lot of people who are drawn to particularly Morrigan, but other energies as well, have gone through serious life trauma, like abuse trauma of one form or another. And there may be something in the fact that we're talking about these things more now than ever. We're saying it's not acceptable for survivors to be living in the dark anymore. So we're engaging with dark goddess energy to draw these truths that need to be spoken, even though they're difficult, into the light. And that's what we talked about earlier, like dragging things into the light a little bit. And I think that we're living in a world now where, this is more of a Western perspective, unfortunately, but particularly with regards to women, that we're talking more openly about things that are no longer acceptable that women have been putting up with for generations. So there was a thread this morning talking again about domestic violence and how it's no longer acceptable. And we've kind of been struggling and fighting against like this kind of backlash against it with things in Russia, such as Russia basically trying to decriminalize domestic violence and things. But now more than ever, we're dragging that into the light, and the dark goddesses are dragging that into the light. And we're saying these are abuses that will not stand, and we are going to talk about them. And I feel like that's a common thread with a lot of people who have worked with and are drawn to and are spoken to by dark gods and goddesses, because there are dark gods. We should point this out. I mentioned Hades earlier. That's becoming more of an awareness, and we're fighting back against being silenced in a way. And I think that might have a commonality and might have something to do with it as well. So I'll come back off my soapbox now. I'll sit down.
Yeah, no, preach it. No, I agree. I think that's very true. And I think that could be a draw of the darker deities as well, because it's almost like having permission to have experienced those things. Like, again, in my past experiences with a lighter aspect of deity, it was still, there was shame. Like, even though there was like, okay, so not with the deity, that wasn't the deity's fault, it's the people around the deity, right? Like that's the experience we're having on earth. But there was still that kind of like the people who are often, okay, no, that's not right either. Okay. Some people who are focused on light like to pretend that darkness doesn't exist. And therefore anything that happens in the darkness is not a good thing. It's shameful. It shouldn't be spoken about. It shouldn't be looked at. And I feel like that may be an experience a lot of people have had. And with the darker aspects of deity, it's like there's that permission there to go there and to have had those experiences and to bring them up and have them looked at and have them healed and kind of be in that space. Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, there are an awful lot of us who have been through hell. So I think, like these kind of female and male deities hold a real draw, because there is that mirroring. You can see something there and you go, oh, okay, yep, that this is a safe place to be me.
So there was a question about light and dark, but I think we've more or less covered it. But what I will say about lightness and darkness is, for me, and I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm totally spoiling my own blog post because it will be in my blog post, but light and dark are not two polarities. For me, light and dark exist within and without one another. And it's like a labyrinth. And basically you're walking around this labyrinth, and every time you're turning a corner or you're twisting around or you're just changing perception, you're getting a different view of spirituality, of yourself, of God, of goddess, of deity, of whatever it might be, through a lens of light or dark. And it's not about there are light gods over here or dark goddesses over here. There is light darkness within darkness, because they cannot exist without each other. And you can see this in a very literal sense, and when you're looking at light and shadows and how shadows are cast and things, and then that you cannot see anything if you're completely engulfed in darkness, so you're not even aware. So there must be pricks of light somewhere to be able to see things. So even though we have been addressing it as a dark goddess, I'm always super hesitant to describe the Morrigan as a dark goddess. It's kind of one of these hook things. It's like, if you have dark goddess as a title, that hooks people in, but it's not necessarily the truth of the matter. It's the Morrigan has this incredible sense of humor, for starters. This, like, you've always said she's tough on you isn't a fair thing to say. Okay, so this is what I'm going to say about the Morrigan with regards to being tough on you. She is never going to tell you that your experiences, the abuses that you suffered, are your fault. She's going to tell you that you own what happened to you, and that was a catalyst for the becoming of you, and that you are responsible to not then go and abuse somebody else. So that is something she would be tough on you. You have been through this hell, so it is now in your court not to become less than you are. So she'd be tough there. She wouldn't be tough here. She would be like, this horrifying, mattifying mess, this amalgamation of nasty funk that you've been through has allowed you to come through. Like I've forgotten the flower, and the flower that grows from the muck. That's lotus. A lotus. Thank you. I'm like lily. I'm like, it's not lily, it's L something. Lotus. And that's a little bit of a Lilith thing as well, who's another dark goddess. That's one of her symbols. But it allows you to come through all of that, and it's not in spite of it. It's not. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you're such a good person in spite of everything you've been through. And you're like, no. Morrigan has taught me that all that ugliness has taught me to know who I am. So I might not wish that situation on anyone else, and I wouldn't, and you shouldn't. But it's that breaking of self has allowed for a re-emergence of self. So then she holds you to a higher standard, particularly in how you are outwardly. And it's not about devaluing you. It's about personal sovereignty, which we've talked about. It's about enabling you to be more, to feel more, to. I have never been blamed by Morrigan. Okay, I'm a survivor of abuse. Hi, my name is Joey. And at no point has she ever blamed me. She has never, ever told me that it was my fault. Other human beings have told me it was my fault. And to be honest with you, Morrigan has kind of like a righteous wrath to her. And she defends, and other dark goddesses defend women who have come under attack, who have been abused. A lot of the dark goddesses work within this energy, and they have a protective vibe towards them. And I have never been blamed for anything like that. That's it's difficult for me to put it into words in a way. It's just part of my life that happened, and I can't change that it happened. And at this point, I don't want to change anything about my life, because I am who I am because of everything I have lived through. And she will definitely, if you're being kind of like lazy or crybaby about it, she's not going to like plaster on your boob or anything. She'll be like, come on, you know, you can survive more than this. You've got this. Come on, up. But she has never at any point blamed me for the difficulties of my life. Never once.
Yeah, I've never had that. Like, I don't feel like she's like that stern person, like standing over you with a ruler, ready to smack you if you get it wrong, kind of thing, or go in the wrong direction. I haven't got that energy from her at all. Shush. Sorry, dog. Come here. But yeah, like you said, like I think that, yeah, she absolutely has that. Like she's she's not gonna, like, you know, if you're being all like, oh, these are my excuses and blah, it's like, well, no, like, I'm seeing through that. But I've never had a stern or blaming attitude from her at all. Like, yeah, I can understand because of the way she's talked about sometimes people having that idea, but absolutely not. It is that mother energy. I'm not going to take your shit because I know that you're actually lying to yourself right now. But there isn't, like, there's no forceful nature about her either. Yeah, in that way.
She can be worked with to ensure abusers get, karma is not the right word, it actually is overused in pagan cycles and means something different. But if we're talking about consequences, if you want to hold somebody to account, dark goddesses can do that for sure. And they, when their righteous wrath is invoked, and if they're on board with the righteous wrath, yeah. Yeah, that would, yeah. good luck to the target of wrath. But yeah, you can work with her in terms of, there are people, for example, who work with dark goddesses, and when they come together and they want justice because they've seen a rapist get off, for example, and there will be people who come and work with dark goddess energy in terms of that. Yes, and Arwen makes a very good point. Like, a lot of the patriarchal dogma surrounding Morrigan, a lot of her mythos was written down by Christian monks who are going to be men, and so she gets kind of demonized. Like, I've actually talked to someone before because, like, she's described as being like demonic and mother of demons in certain places, and I've never felt comfortable with that description of her. I'm like, that's something from like a Christian perspective, and is not something that makes any sense to me in terms of the rest of it. So, are there any questions before we wrap this up? That anybody has any dying, burning questions? Because we've kind of gone over by a little margin because I was late, and the questions have been really good, and we've got to let Owlvine go. So has anybody got any last burning questions before we wrap up for this particular Views with Verse? If people have a lot more questions, I can always book Owlvine to come on again later after we get through the cycle of other people that we're going to have.
This was so much fun. I love talking Morrigan with you.
I love talking Morrigan with you.
Yay!
So nobody else has any burning questions. I've had Brigitte come to me once or twice. Morrigan will work with her quite easily. She has kind of like a sister energy. But Brigitte is another one of these goddesses that people like, oh, well, she's a light side of the goddesses, right? No. Brigitte has her fiery arrows of justice side to her. So, Joey, is there somewhere I can talk to you about goddesses? You can contact me through the Starry Eyed Facebook page, or through my personal page, which you can probably find through the Starry Eyed Facebook page, or just send me a message on YouTube and I'll link you. Is there anything that you would like to promote, Owlvine, before we go? Any upcoming video series or anything like that?
Not really. I haven't made a video in a while. I've been doing like a lot of live hangouts over the last few weeks, and I just looked on my thing today. It's like been 2 weeks. I'm like, holy crap. So I guess I'd like to promote that there will be a video coming at some point soon. Again, I was going to do it today and then it just didn't happen. So son's on school holidays, so things just aren't running as smoothly as they used to. But no, not really. I'm on YouTube, but I think I recognize most people in this chat, so I think people know that. Got a Facebook and Instagram too, if you're interested. Other than that, I've got a lot of things written down, a lot of video ideas that I would like to do. It's just a matter of sitting down and actually doing them. So I will get onto that at some point.
Babe is my goddess, Arwen. Babe is my queen. I love her. She's amazing. So if you did not know, I am Joey Morris. I should hope you know by now. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Starry-Eyed Supplies. That is also my store. I'm also on Instagram. I'm also on Pinterest. I am everywhere, stalking you at every opportunity. Carly's exactly the same in regards to that, with coming out of abusive relationships. They can absolutely strengthen. I think that's a good place to actually round up the interview, because we've kind of hung on for quite like nearly half an hour extra now because of questions. It's not me, I have no problem. It's late for where Owlvine is, and she needs to wrap up her night. That dark goddess and dark god energy often comes to those who need to rebuild from the ashes, from those who have been broken, for those who have fallen, for those who, and even those who have survived and are looking for new purpose, looking for new growth. Dark goddesses, particularly Morrigan, but others such as Lilith, Carly, and so on and so forth, they do come and they do help us to really build, grow, and rebirth ourselves from who we used to be. So I think that's a good place to end the first Morrigan interview that we've had here for Views with Verse. I'm sure there will be more, because I love talking about Morrigan and getting different perspectives. So thank you very much to Miss Owlvine for putting up with going over and all the technical difficulties. Thank you guys for coming and joining us despite it being a crazy o'clock in America. And that's it for this video. Bye.